Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Show Up with Camron Gran. I'm your host, Camron Gran, and today we will be going over another DBT skill. This week I decided to go over walking the middle path. I definitely think that we've done something similar to this in the past. It's kind of similar to Wise Mind, where you have the rational and irrational, you have the emotional mind, and then you have the logical mind. And then the wise mind is kind of like where you have both things in balance and use both of those methods to come to a decision. But I decided for this, I wanted to make sure that we just stuck with like the middle path, and it definitely is to help us just go over some things that we might need a refresher on. We have dialectics, which is what dialectical behavior therapy is based on. It's basically like balancing opposites, yin and yang, balance. Like you never want anything to be like more important than others. Everything has its moment. Some things can be both true and not true, which is why validation is important, because we definitely want to make sure as we're going along this path that we're validating ourselves, because it can get kind of scary, especially when we feel lost or when we feel like we're doing a lot of things but nothing seems to be changing. It's almost like we're working so hard to fix something we get lost from acknowledging the moment. And I say that because I definitely have been in that zone recently myself, where I'm like, I'm doing all the things for dialectical behavior therapy. I'm talking to my therapist. I'm doing all these things that are my life. I made sure that I cemented myself in my current moment, because for me, I realized that my state of being is to run or to start over. I do plan to move to LA, but the thing is, when you're so used to be constantly on the verge of being thrown out. I lived in New York, and I paid for everything, and my college tuition covered everything. But even there, I was definitely living like I was on the verge of homelessness. And that can be a very dangerous thing to do to yourself. You got to make sure that you're doing what you need to do to make sure that you're embracing this current moment, because if you're always waiting for that shoe to drop, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you're like, oh, I'm going to be homeless. Like, this stuff is going to make me homeless. It's going to make me homeless. And then really, if you had just let those thoughts go, you probably wouldn't have ever ended up being homeless. But it's because you're obsessed with it that those things turn up to be real. And that's why validation is important, because you can validate a negative thought without allowing it to come true. For instance, if you're worried about being homeless, I would sit down with yourself and just ponder why you think that is. What is happening in your life where you feel like you're just being thrown out? For me, the major reason I felt that way was because I realized I never really cemented anything. I love movies, and as a child, my dream was to have a movie collection and a book collection and to display that, because I'm proud of those things, because they meant so much to me, especially because for me, those were the things that raised me. And while that might be sad for other people, for me, that was like the difference between myself and my family. And I don't want to be my family, because my family is all about limited love. And I've always been so confused by that, because they're the ones who preached unconditional love, and then they didn't realize that they were not actually accepting that or giving that out themselves. Everything you put out there should be like what you're capable of giving. It shouldn't be something that you expect in return. Love shouldn't be transactional. And that's what I realized was the main flaw with my family, is every little thing I did or everything that was being used against me were things that I had done purely because I was trying to be there for my family, but when really for them, they were doing it because they thought that they would get something else in return later on. And that can be a very dangerous thing to live with, because I love people unconditionally, and I am trying to figure out how to make people earn that from me first, because I give that out so freely that's why it hurts me so much when I'm doing all these things, because that's what you do for people that you love, and then none of that energy is given back to me. I'm constantly thinking about the people I love. One of the things I realized is I really value that. I need somebody to want to talk to me. I need somebody to reach out to me, because I am an introvert. I do a lot of extroverted things for a solid piece of time, and then I go back to being an introvert. I can't always be out there putting myself out there all the time. I can't always be putting myself out there. I need to also have people reach out to me. Otherwise, I feel like I'm putting myself where I don't belong. And people don't always get that. It can feel very frustrating, especially when you don't realize that maybe you're in a bad environment. You're like, what's wrong with me? Why won't they love me? I mean, that's a very common thought for me that I had. Validation is something that really helped me, because I surrounded myself with people who need to be not validated. They need to be right about everything. I don't need to be right about everything. And I have friends who might challenge me on that. But what I need is to make sure that you validate what I'm saying first. And then I can listen to what you're trying to say. It just is really frustrating me when people can't even acknowledge the point you're making or what you're trying to say. They're just so focused on themselves that they can't like put a moment to just like reflect on what you said and then acknowledge that you expressed yourself to them. And then, well, I didn't mean that in the way that you received it, because I had thought that by saying it this way you would have gotten this because of previous conversations we had. Again, that is very therapy speech to me, but then even when I talk to my therapist, sometimes she's like, you're actually better at this than you think. And that's when I realized that another thing that when you're walking the middle path that you have to work on is recovering from invalidation. I constantly think that what I think is wrong. And it's because I was trained by the people around me that the way I love is wrong. And my therapist, as I'm talking to her, is just constantly telling me that no, that's not true. The sad truth is you're actually showing love and treating others in the healthy way. And the people around you are just never like shown you healthy love. It's always been toxic. And so because my brain has been trained to, I don't want to say thrive, but like exist in a toxic environment, I'll accept terrible treatment because I feel like that's the only way I'll ever get love. As I've been going through therapy, I've realized, no, I don't need that in my life. Like, I would love to have somebody in my life. I would love to have more friends. I would love all those things, but I would not want that at the cost of having to go backwards. If people want to be in my life, then they need to validate my experience. And I realized that if you're somebody who invalidates me, and I picked that up early on, depending on how early, if it's like I've only met you once, probably I won't say anything. But if we've been hanging out a while and then your habit is to invalidate, then I might be like, we probably shouldn't be friends anymore because this really upsets me. And I don't know how to talk to you because it seems like all you ever do is invalidate me. And it's not a good thing to put yourself in that environment. We as human beings love connection. We love speaking with our friends. We love hearing about their stories. If I share my bad times with you or my good times with you, I need you to share that with me. Some people don't need that. They don't listen to her that way. They don't like find enjoyment or fulfillment through that. And I realized I can't be that way. To me, I could be like, we're like work colleagues, but if I was to consider you my friend, then I need you to like express your good and bad times, because like for any friendship, especially a friendship, if you're trying to have them for a long time, you want them to go to you when they're struggling. I want to be there for my friends when they're in trouble, and I want to help them because some of my friends have helped me when I've been in trouble. And I realized, especially with the fact that I had missed a couple people's weddings that I'm there, you have to think ahead. I have distress avoidance. I think in the moment, what are things that only make me feel today, but are not necessarily good in the long run? Why is that bad? Because if you're always looking to today, you're never going to achieve something in the future because you're never actually taking steps towards anything. Now, this next thing I'm going to talk about, which is like the last thing for today, which is for walking the middle path, is strategies for changing behavior. Obviously, if you've been doing something for 20 years, or in my case, 28, almost 29, there are things that are so ingrained with who you are, it's very hard to change. And if you're always obsessing and trying to make yourself feel bad if you don't make those big adjustments, you're never going to change them because then you're just making yourself feel bad. Negative energy does not beget positive change, in my opinion, because you really have to turn off your brain, especially if it's a new behavior, and you might even have to embrace the suck. I don't know who said that. I know I heard it in a TV show before, but like you have to embrace that without thinking. And that's the key for me, because like my thoughts are just always around there. They're always making me like question everything I'm doing. And while I love thinking, I don't necessarily love the fact that my go-to emotion is to freeze. There are so many things that I want to do that is changing my behavior, because like things that I value, I didn't realize how much they meant to me until recently. For instance, my writing. I want to get my book published. I've been editing it. I have a couple of drafts, but I need to finish it and finalize it so I can just send it out to publishers, do the research to know where to send it. And all that seems like a lot of work. If I just narrow it down and I'm just like, okay, do I have it in me to write 6 pages today? I'm only saying 6 pages because that's what Stephen King does. And I'm trying to look up to people that I admire so that way I can push myself. Do I think I'm Stephen King? No. For changing behavior, I've definitely been able to do things that are hard for me when I have not thinking about it. And the reason I brought up writing is a lot of people think I'm being harsh when I say, how did I get my first book done? Have I been able to been able to start on my second book while I'm still editing my first one? It's because I had to embrace that my writing, when I first start doing it, is just going to be trash. And then people are like, oh, you shouldn't think of your stuff as trash. And I'm like, if you view trash as a negative thing, then maybe you're right, you shouldn't do that. But we all in our everyday lives generate trash, and when you generate trash, what are you supposed to do afterwards? You're supposed to go through and you're supposed to find the things that are recycled or things that are long living. And that's kind of what happened. Is like, before I was just treating my work as like a golden statue, like always perfect, couldn't do anything to it. But now I'm like, let's get it out there so it's like we can actually establish the story, and then we can go through and like make sure that the characters are solid, and then the drafts, like probably the details get more enhanced. But it's all those little things, and then the final thing you have to do is just got to make sure that you're prepared to send it out to publishers, because like obviously when you're publishing a story, you like have the solid things that you like need to stay. I'm very flexible. Like, as long as I know that everything that is like I need in the book is there, I can be flexible and like delete scenes or figure out how to like generate what I think needs to be in the story and like consolidate it into like less scenes. I'm all very flexible. That's kind of like the same thing with strategies for changing behavior. Like, all that I'm talking about, those are small little steps. And that's kind of what I like about the 6 pages a day. I just thought it was 1 page a day, but 6 pages seems like a lot. But like, I'm like, well, I'm editing and I'm trying to write another book. So if I'm like, oh, 3 pages of editing and 3 pages of just writing creatively. And then if I don't have it in me to do either of those things, I know I have to research and find an agent, or the other thing that I could research is how to submit to publishers. What kind of publications are looking for the kind of story that I'm writing? It's like all little baby steps, and you just have to figure out how what you can do will add up to a better story in the long run. And the other thing I'll say is it's kind of the same thing with all 4 of them. Is the biggest thing that we have to learn is radical acceptance. We all are human, we all have thoughts, and sometimes we act on thoughts that we shouldn't. But those are all part of us, and all we have to do is siphon through those little things and find the things that are us and find the things that are not. And if they are not us, then we just need to toss them out and say, you served me for whatever reason, but now it's time to let you go. And I have a major goal in my life when it comes to my health. But every time I start working on it, I look at the big picture, and that makes me want to do anything. Whereas if I just radically accept that some days I might struggle to be as good as I used to be, if I can focus on just doing the small things over time, or just focusing on the things that make me feel good in the moment. I'm doing these activities. I was in an accident. I have a PT. I can do those things at least. And as long as I stick to a routine and I'm doing that constant, it should have long-term effects. It's making me feel healthier, if it's making me feel more motivated, if it's making me feel more seen and heard. And then the other thing I'll say is walking the middle path is harder because there will be times when you want to validate what should not be validated. Like, there are times when you're looking at your friend and you're thinking that, like, oh, they must be right. Because they're my friends, they know me, they wouldn't be saying this if it was incorrect. But I always caution people to remember that although you're friends with people, your friendship is based on the person that they created in their head. And like, if you vibe with somebody, that vibe is still a perception on their end. And so if somebody's trying to invalidate you, always look back to your own core beliefs. And then if you're like, well, this person had a problem, but nothing I did is against my core beliefs, and I can't tell them that I'm going to change. Or in the case if you're doing the dear man skill, if you're presenting somebody with like what you need to continue the relationship, if they can't give that to you, tell them that it's okay. People can be good people, but still be bad for you. Sorry, I'm doing this because we're not talking about a subject I'm comfortable with. That's why my hands were up here trying to cover my face. But that's the thing I would like caution you guys to remember with everything, especially on bad days. If you ever lash out at somebody, a stranger, a friend, a family member, if they're really upset and then talk to you about like, I felt like what you did was uncalled for, I would really reflect on everything and figure out if whether or not your reaction was based on something else going on in your life, and so that your reactions were like your emotions already heightened, and so they just got the end of your very emotional day. And usually people understand that if you talk to them about it. The beauty of radical acceptance is it's all up to you. Nobody else has to, only you. And if people have a problem with it, that's their problem. Because the only version of you out there is the one that you inhabit every day. And if other people want to say stuff about you, that's their problem. If this is a thing I have a problem with sometimes, is I don't occupy my mind with other people. And I'm trying very hard to continue that, because when I'm with people, that's when my brain is running 1,000 different scenarios with them. I have been able to catch myself more now and be like, no, that person hasn't spoken to you in a very long time. You don't need to occupy time of your life trying to think about them. If we were supposed to, we would talk. If they don't have time, that's fine. But I need to be me. And if they aren't willing to give me what I need, then it's just something that we're going to have to let go. And if I really mattered to them, I probably would have heard from them by now. And also, in my case with some people, if I really mattered to them, they would have actually cared enough to speak to me. Especially when I'm not somebody that you should be afraid of. Nobody believes you when you say that you can tell me anything, regardless of whether or not it's me. I just want to make sure that when I leave here, I've heard everything. I've heard your side. Like, you don't have anything unsaid. You don't feel like regret later on in life. What I like about myself is that I say the things that are hard because I know that if I don't say them, I might regret them later. And that is walking the middle path. To highlight this, I'm going to be watching another episode of Mom. We're going to dive into that, but I want to definitely break down the walking the middle path for you. Because overall, the major thing with the middle path is just balancing acceptance and change. Change is hard, especially when you're changing by yourself, or when change is happening and people aren't telling you why the change is happening. You're like, oh, we're really close. And then all of a sudden it's like there's distance, but nobody's talking to you about it. And then you're like, oh, did I do something wrong? And then in your encounters, since you notice the change starting, they're really not telling you anything. It's very subdued. It's not very clear what's going on. Some of it, I feel like, is justified, and some of it is just like, why would you not talk to me about things that are upsetting you? Like, I'm not a scary person. I'll hear you out. I'm actually very much on the side of let's work through this together, especially if you love somebody. Like, if they're struggling with you as a person, or if they're just struggling in general, why not hear them out? Why not listen to them? Sometimes all anybody ever needs is just to voice what's going on. But when I was fighting the changes that were happening, my mind was worse. Now I'm just like, no, it is what it is. I can't change them. I can't change the way that it's turning out. I can't voice something that I've already voiced 1,000 times. If they were going to hear me, they would have heard me. So making myself feel bad again is not the answer. So all I can do is just move past it and stick with like the next stage of my life. With that, we're going to move on to the episode of Mom. For all everyone out there that missed it, the first 2 episodes of Mom had to do with Christy finding out that her daughter was pregnant, and then her mom, Bonnie, coming back into her life and struggling with the fact that her daughter is really close with her mother more than she is with her, which is funny because basically Christy's relationship with her mother is her own relationship with her daughter. And so that's kind of a little bit of a recap for you, but let's read the synopsis before we get into the episode. Season 1, episode 3, and the synopsis is, Christy goes on her first date since she stopped drinking. Meanwhile, Bonnie teaches her grandson Roscoe to gamble. Boy, this is going to go over well. I will say, caution to anybody else out there. If you struggle with addiction, I would caution you not to replace one addiction with another, because usually, especially if you have an addictive personality, that other one will spiral out of control. And so you just want to make sure you keep it in check, is all I'm going to say about cautioning. But with that, let's begin the episode. Here we go. We are 4 minutes and 23 seconds into the episode. We just hit the opening title sequence, and the reason why I stopped it is because we just talked about radical acceptance and also validating your emotions, especially when you realize something that you're doing is bad and it goes against your morals. And in this episode, it opens up with the fact that this guy Christy doesn't like is hitting on her, wants to go out with her, and the only person in the way of that is her boss, who she's been having an affair with. And the reason why I like it is because Christy isn't denying that that's wrong. She doesn't have a problem with it, but she does realize that she needs to get out of it. And then she's even telling her boss that he should get out of the situation because it's not a good place to be. And that's definitely a form of radical acceptance. It's definitely a point of knowing your core values and definitely analyzing the situation, because she doesn't know this person, but she knows that the place she's been in isn't great. And so a way to move forward with that is to just check in on yourself and then kind of push past anything that's been holding you back. The thing I like is that when she finally decides to give the guy a chance and go out with him, he's basically at a celebratory dinner because his sister and him got divorced. She kind of goes to his family to check in about how cool the brother is for her, like when they're thinking about dating him. I like that in the sense of a person, she can make her own decisions, but she's still willing to check in with people, and it definitely goes along with going with what's true and not true at the same time. So it's kind of like, well, she knows she needs to get out of the situation, but she also acknowledges that there are worse situations that you can get yourself into without at least trying to check in with somebody. And so a solution is just to say, hey, before I give a chance and go out with your brother, I am a single mom. I don't want anything to like hinder that or like affect my kids. Is this a good idea? And obviously the sister could like lie and be like a wingman for her brother, or because she's being so honest, might give her actual feedback. This thing that I would say with you as well when you're going with people is just try to be as open and honest with the people around you as possible, because they'll definitely respect it and like it way more. The only other thing I will say is life can be hard, and we can let it affect us, or we can just move past it. Because definitely her boss was giving her a lot of like flack for wanting to go out with this guy, and she could have just been like, yeah, I guess because we're going out and you can do whatever I want. But she's like, no, we shouldn't be doing this, and you don't get to control who I date or who I'm around. And you can't use because he tries to say, I thought we were monogamous, cheating on his wife. So she's like, no, you can't use that either, because clearly you don't really care about those things, and I'm not going to like give you what you want just because it's inconvenient for you. And so sticking your ground is something that you need to get used to, especially as you're going through this. And my point is, Christy's in a bad situation and she's fighting her way out, but she's not judging herself for being in that place. And that's why I like Christy especially, is because she acknowledges when she's in a bad thing, but she doesn't focus on hating on herself. She focuses on, what's the next step? Can I fix this? How can I make sure that I don't repeat the same mistake again in the future? We are at 7:06. We basically finished the scene with Christy and her mother going through her closet trying to get ready for her date. And the reason why I'm highlighting this specifically is they're both recovering alcoholics, and there's an imbalance of knowing what is okay with sharing with somebody and what things you should keep to yourself, especially when you're just meeting them for the first time and you don't know how much to share, especially when you went so hard when you were doing everything so much. Because like Chrissy's trying to open it to her mother, telling her, oh, I don't know what to tell him because I don't want him to get scared and run away. And then her mom's like, yeah, you shouldn't tell him because he might not be able to handle it. Well, her mother validated her feelings. The issue with that is it's kind of like, well, you don't want to invalidate the fact that that's part of your life by not sharing it with somebody. Especially if you're first dating them, I would be open and honest about it, because somebody is more scared off by the amount of weight you put on it than in what you're actually sharing. And if you're feeling like it's not something that you have under control, that's more worrying to me than what you're actually doing. Because if you can't control yourself, that's very concerning, especially when you're dealing with things like hard drugs and stuff like that. And like, 'cause it's not just alcohol, they definitely went harder than that. And it's just like, okay, especially like Christy is trying to change her behavior by like not dressing in the way that she used to, like, and not acting how she used to act. And like the reason why she's nervous is the fact that this guy is her first date since she became sober, who's actually a good person to date. And so nothing that she wants to wear is something that she feels comfortable in wearing when she's not drunk. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, this problem exists. What can I do to fix it without like completely invalidating the truth of the moment and not invalidating the fact that you're scared and not wanting to scare somebody off? And so it's definitely a balancing act that you have to do, which is all the middle path is just really finding the way to balance the truth of the moment with the change that you're trying to exist. And because she could definitely like wear those clothes and just embrace that old personality without like the boost of alcohol. But then a lot of times people realize that like that person that they say they were when they were drinking was never actually them. It was who they were, because being the life of the party, being fun was good in that moment, when really it didn't really serve anybody in the long run. We are at 8:55, and I stopped it because we just watched a scene with Bonnie trying to defend Christy from her daughter, who's definitely attacking her the entire time she's trying to get ready for her date. And what I like about that scene is it definitely has the formation of change. Because the whole thing that Bonnie's trying to point out with her daughter, Violet, is the fact that if she wants Christy to be a better mom, she can't keep looking at her as like the drunk mom who like abandoned her and was bad to her the entire time, because then that's all she'll ever be. And then she'll end up like, Bonnie's example is she'll end up having 20 cats living with her daughter, and you'll end up chasing her down the street trying to pin her rope shut. That's the example Bonnie gave. But it's kind of like, if you're wanting somebody to be able to validate themselves, you have to really stop validating and making that voice that they question themselves. You want to make sure that voice of invalidation gets quieter, and so they can accept themselves and like dress how they want and get ready the way they want. Because if they can, it's more likely that they'll be happier and like be the kind of person that you want them to be, and be more comfortable in your own skin, so you're not trying to put up a front with somebody, especially if you've never been around them before. We're at 11:21. The scene that just happened is hilarious and also frightening at the same time. To me, it is the pristine example of what radical acceptance looks like. Even though Christy was panicking, it's just so amazing to me the ability you can have to just lay it all out there. And basically what happened is she was trying to be polite and not tell somebody on the first date that she's a recovering alcoholic, but he kept pushing her, wanting her to drink, until eventually she just snapped and said, oh, I can't do that because of all this, this, and this. And then she just basically told the entire story of not only her recovery, but also like the things that she did instead to cope with the fact that she was recovering. The way that it's said is definitely without judgment, because in order to change behavior, you have to acknowledge that it's bad, but some behavior is hard to change without something to help leaven the weight of it. In Kirsty's example, she leavened like stopping drinking alcohol with like sweets and food, and then so basically she had this adjustment period, and then she gained 18 pounds, and then she was able to lose it after she was able to like get past that alcohol. I just think that it is a good example of radical acceptance. And although the scene ends with Christy running out of the room, out of her work, and just seeing her just like herself out there, it is scary to do that, and her nerves obviously the best of her. But like at the same time, she was just sharing the events that happened, part of her life, but she wasn't doing it through a lens of judgment. It was just trying to like tell somebody as honestly as possible, and then realizing after she did it that it was probably so much to share, she left in a panic. And that's actually one thing I like about moms so much, is the fact that they share such hard things without focusing on being negative, or at least negative like talking to yourself. They acknowledge the bad things that they did, and they try to like move past it. They don't often linger on the negative bad side. It can be easier to get lost in those moments, but especially when you're trying to change a behavior and you're trying to find balance so you can accept that you just quit drinking. Okay, so we're going to replace this with temporarily until my body is okay with no longer having that. That way, it's not something I'm constantly needing anymore. At 17:20, and basically we've been bouncing around between Christy and her date with Justin Long, and Bonnie with her grandson, basically teaching him how to play 21 blackjack, that game, and basically losing and taking advantage of her like knowledge with gambling. It's an interesting way to bond with your grandson, I'll say that much. But the reason why I paused it was because the whole like, sequence between Chrissy and Justin Long, I think, is a good highlight of, I think, putting yourself out there, but more importantly, putting up your boundaries. Because Chrissy stormed out of the restaurant, and one thing that she kept hounding Justin Long for when he followed her was, "What's wrong with you?" Where they basically spewed all this like emotional baggage at you. You like chased me out of the restaurant and still wanted to go on this date with me. It was definitely very sound, because his problem was the fact that his previous relationship, the issue was she wouldn't tell him how she was feeling, and Christy can't stop doing that. And what I loved about that scene is it ends with Christy stopping and saying, I really like you. I want to explore this with you, but I don't think I can do it right now. But definitely give me your number, because as soon as I'm ready for a relationship, I definitely would want to call you and maybe see if you're still available to make something happen. And I love that, because it was a way of validating the fact that she did just spew out all these things that were very hard for her. It was kind of a breakdown, and without judging herself for it, she acknowledged, okay, well, if I'm feeling all these things, I'm probably not ready for this kind of emotional step right now. And that's why I think it's important, is like, you can both want to be with somebody while also not being ready to be with that person. And that's part of the dialectic, the first step, which is things that are true and not true. Things can be both. You can want to be with somebody, but also acknowledge it's probably not the right time to do that right now. And I think it's just all about like accepting it is what it is in this current moment. We can want things and realize it's not good for us right now. We can't do that right now. And I think that that's okay. And I think the reason why I find that so beautiful is after she shared that with Justin Long, he was like, yeah, I wish I could like argue the fact that you're not ready, but you definitely had a meltdown in a restaurant and you definitely stormed out. I didn't get a chance to say anything. I chased after you and I love this moment with you, but you're probably right. And I do want to be ready if you want to call. And I like that because after she laid out her boundary, he definitely received it very well. And I just think that's so rare with people, at least in my life, where once they've laid out a boundary, they've actually just respected it and not needed me to defend it, which is something that I would struggle so hard with it because even if they're not asking me to defend it, I would definitely feel like I would have to because, again, when you're recovering from invalidation, it feels like you always have to defend it. I don't know if Christy did defend it at all, but even if she did, I feel like Justin Long's character definitely halted her in her steps and was like, because eventually she's just saying all these things that are wrong with her and he's like, no, you're sharing and you keep sharing and that's like what I want is I want somebody who shares with me. Again, values being laid out on both sides, boundaries, what they want. It's a really good way to me to start a relationship. So, I mean, obviously when Christy's ready. We're at the end of the episode. Basically, after this date that she had, Christy decided to break up with her boss. Hilarity ensued. She almost ran him over. Had taken him to the emergency room. You know, the whole ordeal. Great setup for a sitcom. And the reason why I'm stopping and highlighting that is after realizing like that there is somebody out there who's willing to just accept what she's going through and like listen to her and not be there for her. She's like, yeah, I really need to break this off with my boss. There's no positive thing and I want to be able to be there with somebody without having any kind of negative interaction. She doesn't want to have to put her place there, and that's what I really respect and I like about that. And she breaks up with him, and then I also feel like that's building on like her boundary that she established, which is the fact that she's not ready to be with anybody. And it wasn't just this new person, it's just anybody in general, especially somebody who's bad for her. This is when she shared it with her mother. Her mother not only validated that experience, she approved the fact that she shouldn't be with that person. And then in a very Bonnie manner, she got her daughter a gift that maybe not every mother-daughter out there would feel comfortable receiving. And what I love about Christy and Bonnie's dynamic is it definitely is a mother and daughter who don't have any shame or secrets with each other. They're just out there living their best lives, trying to support each other in no matter what, whatever they might need, whatever could make them happy. It's beautiful and disturbing at the same time. And I'll leave that there. That is kind of the way I think that walking the middle path is beneficial because it's definitely a balancing act where you're trying to be there for somebody, but you're also trying to make sure that when you set a boundary, you follow through on it. And then when you're trying to change behaviors, you kind of do the baby steps because instead of just immediately breaking up with her boss, she kind of did a baby step of just trying to go out and date with somebody to validate the fact that she didn't want to actually be in a relationship, especially with like how she's dealing emotionally and going through AA. So not only, and then realizing, oh, I should probably not be dating anybody because I'm still trying to change the behavior and be able to be better for myself and be better for other people. And I'm definitely not in that stage yet. And that's kind of what I like about that is definitely this episode definitely walked the middle path the most. Obviously it's a comedy, so there definitely were a lot of highlighting moments because the whole Bonnie teaches her grandson how to gamble only to swindle him and then him to find out later that she was lying. It definitely is another like lesson about, oh, you probably shouldn't lie to somebody if you're trying to win money from them. It's a very bad thing to do. There's a term for that, but I forgot what the term is. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it with me. I really liked exploring another like DBT skill. Feel free to like leave me a comment down below if you have anything that has stuck with you of these shares. I definitely love hearing from you guys. I also would love like a thumbs up. It helps boost this to more people and let them see this if they need it. If you're out there and you're struggling, know you're not alone and things will get better. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. I appreciate your support. And with that, remember as you go out the week to show up for yourself because you matter. All right. Bye-bye.